Why I hate labels and the never ending search for inclusion. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and this video was inspired by a specific comment under my last video from somebody who identifies as non binary. But I realized it could apply to just about any label that people ever come up with. What I'm going to say applies especially if you're a young person that is trying desperately to come up with some identity based around something like a gender, sexuality, lack of a gender or sexuality, or even just a strong identification with a religion or subculture. My message is this. I know you want to come up with a label that fits you perfectly, that also describes enough other people to make it so that eventually you find your people. But the fact of the matter is that if you try to do such a thing, you're going to be searching for the rest of your life. You don't just get to decide what you are and then find people based on shared decisions around what they are. Life doesn't work like that. If you were born biologically male or female and definitely don't feel like taking hormones or getting surgeries to transition, consider yourself lucky and stop worrying about being a normal boy or girl. Just be you. If you are not sure if you are gay, straight, or bisexual, you really don't have to decide immediately. You are allowed to experiment, and you won't be a different person after you've experimented. You'll still be you. Further than that, like in my case, if you do decide that you are gay, don't expect to necessarily find any sort of community of shared interests around other gay guys. More often than not, I personally have little in common with other gay men, and maybe even littler in common with gay men who proudly proclaim that they have little in common with gay men. Very occasionally do I find gay men that I have shared interests with, but even then, it's extremely rare that I actually end up really liking these people and finding them pleasant as individuals. Seriously, for a long while, I was a gay guy who was an electronic music DJ and producer, and let me tell you, the gay DJ producers that I met over the past years especially are largely the most pretentiously boring people in the universe. You couldn't pay me to hang out with most of them, and yes, occasionally they did pay me, and I still got tired of it. So what the hell am I? What, if I were to label myself, what am I? I'm a man. I'm attracted to other men sexually, but that shouldn't matter to you very much unless I might be having sex with you or if you absolutely can't be around homosexual men for some reason. I am particularly good at writing, if you want to talk about traits, especially theatrical writing and theater in general. I'm quite good at composing electronic music and DJing, and fairly good at singing. I'm really fun to go to karaoke with. I can talk about art and design fairly well. I'm also quite good at ping pong and video games. Currently, I'm obsessed with Overwatch and will be starting a secondary channel based around that game with a friend that I play the game with, but eventually I'm sure I'll move on from my obsession with that. I could also safely be called a skeptic, and I have a lot of friends on YouTube that could safely be called skeptics. Though truthfully, that label is vague, and it's purposefully vague because it was mainly a temporary descriptive title that best described a shared goal that we had in common, which was something we shared in common in regards to being skeptical of culture during the second half of Obama's presidency. Now, a lot of people that could be called skeptics are probably going to start being less skeptical because they wanted Donald Trump to be our president. Ultimately, I imagine everybody would also consider themselves skeptics in some capacity or another because nobody delights in being gullible fools. But some of us liked to make videos criticizing the dominant cultural narrative of the times, which is about to shift in a seismic fashion. Still, ultimately, some of us are obviously a certain type of person with certain values about how we treat others and would like to be treated, who have some greater points about how we would like the world to be, and Other people are obviously really just drawn to the arguing itself. And yes, there's room for both, and the arguers do hold the potential idealists accountable. However, in the end, this doesn't make skeptics or any other type of people that just have some vague name like that any sort of uniform group, and we will undoubtedly splinter off into various cliques of people. Some of us are focused on the gender-specific issues of men and boys. Some of us are focused on offering legitimate help for LGBT people as an alternative to feminism's false promises with their monopoly over the LGBT community. Some of us are mostly comedians. I feel like I've made this video before, but it stands to be made again, apparently. I'm not on YouTube for the drama. I might like you, or maybe I can't stand you. And maybe you just don't know either way. But it's gonna take a lot for me to talk badly about you, and if I do, it's usually gonna be about your ideas. I probably don't really care all that much about how you conduct yourself on YouTube enough to make a video about it, and I am more than aware that my audience simply isn't generally interested in me talking about YouTube-specific subjects. And because they would prefer me to make the kind of videos that I make, video essays about ideas that could apply to their lives. Now, might I break this rule? Might I talk about YouTube drama occasionally? Absolutely, because I am me. I'm an individual. I do what I feel like doing. I never claimed to be any one type of way unanimously all the time, and I would never trust anybody that said that they were. In fact, I actively don't trust people who say things like that, especially when they try to put me in a box. Ultimately, the true community that we form in life, if we are so lucky, tends to be somewhat organic. We form relationships with people that we know, usually based around proximity to our geographical location, and we try to continue liking them for better or for worse. And we try to like their kids if they have them for better or for worse. Often we have stuff in common with these people, but often we have only a few things in common with the people in our lives that hopefully might be our community. And thus, we have to try to meet each other halfway to enjoy their company. Maybe I don't really like sports, and maybe you don't really like video games, but we both like karaoke. And so that's how we interact. There's no recipe. You have to ease into it instead of forcing it, and if you try and fail, you'll often end up more hopeless than if you never tried at all, which is why coming up with strange labels like non-binary queer femme to find community will usually just ensure that you're around a bunch of people that you'll end up hating in a few months. So it's best not to bother with those kind of labels. And if you do bother with a label, don't be too attached to it, because every time I've used a label, I've found out very soon after why I shouldn't have, or why I no longer wanted to call myself that label. I'm just me, all right? That's all I have to say for this video. Stay tuned.